Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. I'm going to talk about something that should be bothering every single one of you. Every single one of you should be up in arms about this. And I'm going to present this tonight because I feel like we've worked really, really hard for a long time. And there have been people that have worked even longer trying to bring about knowledge to a people that claim to want freedom from banks, that claim they want freedom from the grind, who claim they need help and respite from neoliberalism and the man tasking them and taking away time from their families. This stream tonight is going to be about the things we claim to want and the things that we are getting instead. And some of it is not the big bad man. Some of it is not the big bad establishment. Some of it is right there in our own backyard. Some of it is the enemy is I. And I'm here to tell you right now, my friends, that when we don't keep our side of the street clean, there is no chance of fixing the other side. So first off, let's start talking about something that is probably a little tricky for folks to understand. And we're going to talk about something that'll lead up to all this called sectoral balances. Sectoral balances are very, very important to understand because you only have so many ways of getting money into the system, if you will, into our economy, into the bathtub that is our lives. Okay. One of them is public spending. In other words, our federal government spends money into the economy. They don't just print money randomly and leave it sit over there on the side for a rainy day. They spend that money into existence with writing laws and writing bills. There is no random printing of money to just sort of dilute the money or change anything. That's gold standard thinking. The only way the federal government spends or creates money is spending it into existence through congressional appropriation. That's one way of getting money into the economy. The second way is to be a net exporting nation that exports our real goods and services, the most important thing we have, our actual real resources, exporting that and getting foreign pieces of paper back. And then we can go ahead and convert that to US dollars. So that's the second thing. And then the third way is private debt. In other words, the thing that all the Greens and all the so-called socialists and all the so woke that they don't even need to sleep kind of people, okay? They want to keep you away because they don't want private banks profiting off of the poor and just regular man, okay? So what happens? Private debt is typically a result of not enough public spending to make it so that we have wage increases, to make it so that we have a decent standard of life. The way to fix that is by spending on the people, right? Through federal spending. So again, three ways of getting money into the economy: public spending, private debt, and being an exporter. Well, the United States hasn't been a net exporting nation in forever. It has been forever since the United States has dreamed of being a net exporting nation. And that's okay. That's A-okay. There is plenty of care work to go around. There is plenty of service work to go around. There are plenty of things that we need to make for our own infrastructure right here, right now, that are not being addressed. There are plenty of kids that don't have schools, not enough teachers, not enough things. So the idea of being a manufacturing company and country and exporting all of our goods and services out is just a little silly. It really is. Even if you don't realize it is. Okay. So that ends up leaving us with federal spending or you and I going into private debt. Well, as you can clearly see, we have $1.5 trillion of private debt hanging around students' necks, be it elderly, be it the youth. $1.5 trillion worth of student loans hanging around our necks. And yet you hear people saying we've got to reduce the deficit, meaning we got to reduce federal spending or we got to raise taxes, which is the same thing. We've got to reduce the national debt, which is, once again, taking away the money from the economy that keeps you and I from going in debt to payday lenders and banks. You don't want the banks in your life? Well, tell that to the idiots that are sitting there pushing to reduce the deficit. The deficit for the public sector that creates money is you and my surplus. That's our surplus. One person's spending is another person's income. And in the case of the federal government, who creates money at will when it writes bills into law and it authorizes spending. So we already know that of the 3 possible spigots that can come into our country, we still do some exporting, but we're not a net exporting nation. In fact, we have about a $500 billion a year annual trade difference. I'm not going to call it an imbalance. I'm going to call it a difference. The current account balances for our trade shows that we are a net importing nation by a large degree. So that means our money is leaving the country. Money that, if you think about it in terms of being a bathtub, is draining out of the economy faster than we're replenishing it with federal spending. So naturally, neoliberals push us to private debt to offset the lack of spending at the federal level. This is one of those moments that should have you going, oh my God, is that what happens when they reduce the deficit? Oh my God, is that what happens when they talk about reducing the national debt? Now, here's the problem. Just recently, the National Committee for the Green Party voted against economic literacy, led by Howard Schweitzer, okay? A guy who builds hay barrel houses, had pushed and pushed and pushed every economic fallacy known to mankind, every fraudulent depiction of economics. And he had a stronghold within the Green Party, and it broke the back of the people that were fighting tooth and nail to teach them how to use economics to bring about a Green New Deal. Now, unfortunately, people like Howard Schweitzer have been around for a while, and they have undue influence on this burgeoning young Green Party. And because of people like him, the Green Party will not be able to enact a Green New Deal. Not as a bloc, not as a coalition. They vetoed going with MMT, and it wasn't even close. It was a huge number. And I'm telling you right now, for all the green enter, all the people that were begging to green enter, they have instead decided to stick with conspiracy-laden right-wing austerity measures, complaining about the national debt, wanting to reduce the national debt. Section M, look it up, of their national platform. They rejected people that are doctors, PhD economists that worked with them. Fidel Kaboob worked with them. Joe Firestone worked with them. And they rejected it. They voted overwhelmingly, and they said it was because it was going to fatten private banks. It was Schadenfreude for the private banksters. Lethal, absolutely irretractable. I don't get it. But here we are. I'm telling you straight up, there is 3 ways to get money into the economy. Public spending, which is created at will by our Congress when it decides and writes a bill. Government checks don't bounce. A net importing nation doesn't have a huge reserve coming in from sales abroad because we spend more out than we bring in. Somehow or another, we got to make up that $500 billion. How do we do that? Because these people refuse to learn, are absolutely recalcitrant and unwilling to yield and learn. It puts it on us, you and I, our children, to go into private debt to keep the economy going. Milton Friedman would be very proud. The ultimate right-wing nut job. The guy who freaking coined quantity theory of money and made everybody afraid of inflation. That same jackass, he wins today. He wins because of this. He wins. Do you realize what I'm telling you is unassailable? It's unassailable. There's 3 ways to fill the bathtub of our economy. $500 billion a year is leaving via imports. That leaves federal spending, and that leaves private debt. Now, when you hear somebody talking about big banks and wanting to get rid of the banks and the banksters and all the other gibberish, which is fine, let's do it. It's important to understand how this all works. If you're running around fanning lies about the private Federal Reserve and the Rothschilds and all that crap, you're part of the problem. No joke, man. I can't even give you a solid and say, you get them next time, bro. Because this is the bullshit. This is the moronic chats by the campfire that destroy progress, sabotage progress. When you understand, you've got 2 choices if you're a net importing nation: public debt and private debt. I should say public debt and private debt, right? Because that's what private debt is to us. You and I can't make dollars out of nothing. And so what they've done to keep the capital class happy, to keep big business happy, is they have made sure that banks are not in competition with the federal government. And they make us believe that we have to reduce debt, reduce the deficit, cut spending, make tough choices. It's all a big pile of bullshit. It's a lie. And your and my life gets harder and harder and harder every single day. Every single day, our lives get more and more difficult, and you can't figure out why. I just laid it out for you in spades. In spades, I laid it out for you. But these fools ran around saying that MMT was a psyop. Jesus. Do you ever get the feeling that people are so woke that they should go back to sleep? You know what I'm talking about? The brain dead. They're like just zombified. It's a psyop. It's a psyop. I mean, it makes me sick in my stomach. It's like they're afraid to win. Now let's look at something. I'm going to use this because it's so easy. It's such low-hanging fruit. The military, in one fell swoop, was given almost $800 billion without a single tax increase. Not one. Not one neoliberal said, what about inflation, guys? If we spend all that money on the military, isn't there going to be inflation? Not one single loser said that. Not one. But that was all money creation. That was all new money. Every bit of it was new money. But not one idiot said anything about inflation. Why is that? Why do you suppose that is? Seriously, why do you suppose that is? Ask that question until you figure it out. I'm going to answer it for you. But I want you to keep asking why not one single dork said anything about inflation when we dropped almost $800 billion on the military. New money. Where's going to be inflation? Inflation. No one said it. No one said it. Not one single person said, what about inflation when we drop that money on the military? But the minute that I tell you, not only can we get rid of student debt, but we can have free college for everyone. We can get paid family and medical leave. We can give you a national health service without any pay-fors. We could give you green energy. And in fact, we could even subsidize the transition immediately. What about high-speed rail? What about fixing all the levees and dams and making sure that our nuclear plants that you may want to close down, but they're on tidal areas, near shorelines? What if we had to gird those up and protect them from climate change? Where are we going to get that money from? You think it's coming from your hard-earned tax dollars? No, it's not. Taxes are a tool to drive the need for currency and also to raise and lower them as needed as a brake pedal or a gas pedal for the economy. Nothing more. They don't pay for anything. Nothing. Not one thing does a federal tax pay for. So again, I'm back to filling the bathtub up. Are we going to fill it with your and my blood from private debt and credit cards and student debt that we can't discharge? Or are we going to have our federal government use public money to make our lives better so we can be with our children? Why in the world would the Green Party reject this? Why in the world would they listen to this guy named Howard Schweitzer? Why? Why would they believe the lies? Why wouldn't they bone up and true up and smarten up so we can have a Green New Deal? I mean, seriously, why not? Don't you want a Green New Deal? I am dumbfounded at the idiocy. It's like a gunshot wound to the junk, intentionally done. Self-inflicted gunshot wound to the package. That's what that is. And they're going to wonder why they can't get a Green New Deal. And they're going to wonder why I didn't green enter. I'm just one guy. And I am fighting for progressives wherever they are. So Green Party, if you want me to be a part of you, and if you don't, that's fine too. But if you do, you got to get rid of these dumbos and you got to start smartening up because they are pulling you down and they're harming our children, literally harming them. Even if you don't realize it, you will realize it because what they are advocating for, unbeknownst to them, is austerity. And austerity leads to death for the people that are most vulnerable, for the poor, the ones that don't have any room for error, like many of us who are living paycheck to paycheck. Folks, I'm telling you, this is extremely, extremely important. There were many good Greens and they're fighting their asses off. Rodolfo Cortez is one of the best of the bunch. Eric Rydberg was pushing as well. But I can tell you, many didn't listen. Many refused to listen because they've got a moniker called greening the dollar. And that little name is too good a marketing ploy to pass up. I guess they figure they're not governing anything, so why bother being useful with their economic package? That's all I can think of. And then you look over at the Democrats and you say to yourself, my God, if they don't get it, we're in trouble. Somebody's got to get it. Somebody's got to wake up. So I have decided for myself that I am a rogue strain of truth that will infect whoever will listen, because I am not giving my soul away to a party that will sit there and use its entrenched old timers club to squash truth and then guilt you to vote green, vote blue, vote whoever. I won't do it. I won't do it, period. I'm going to keep preaching truth. And if it pisses them off, if they want to say it's pontificating, so be it. So be it. I've got a child. And you know what? When I think about it, all I can think about is how freaking badly my patience is out with these folks. My patience is out. Why is that? Because they don't know, but yet they choose to fight. And I'm sitting there begging. I'm saying, it's absolutely easy to see. It's easy to see. Look, this is truth. Where did the money come from for the military folks? Wake up. Time isn't going to last forever before we all implode, before the climate gets in so bad that we can't actually live. And you know what? This can't possibly be good. Think about all those viruses and bacteria in the permafrost that are now suddenly coming back to life as climate change really kicks in. All the algae blooms that are changing the patterns of sharks, you name it. You think we have time to play reindeer games with economic illiteracy? Folks, we've got to cut to the quick. We don't have time. We do not have time. And if you are not trained in economics, you should choose to learn as opposed to opine. You should choose to learn rather than opine, because people that are fighting for this area spend their every waking moment trying to figure out how to present this in such a way that fiercely independent people will be able to understand. This is the most important issue there is, period. 40,000 people every single year commit suicide because of joblessness. 40,000 people. The government has the ability to employ every single citizen it wants, or actually even non-citizens. It has the capacity to give a job guarantee to everyone that wants one. And it has the ability to set the wage at a living wage. Immediately could do it. It has the ability to fund research into all kinds of healthcare cures and research. It has the ability to do a ton of things. We could go back to anything we wanted. You remember back in the day when we didn't blink an eye for the space program? All that stuff is gone because we bought into a lie. And now we're left with those two options: public spending or you and I going into private debt. And guess who else can go into private debt and ends up hurting too? States, provinces, and land like Puerto Rico, territories like Puerto Rico. They can go bankrupt just like you and I can. The federal government could fix them just the same. And yet we choose. It's an active choice. We choose to allow people to die, to allow that nation to suffer, to allow places all over the U.S. to suffer. The federal government could step in and offer block grants to every impoverished area and get them back on their feet and have a standing policy of a federal job guarantee, which would provide us with a permanent end to involuntary unemployment. Folks, neoliberalism has taught us that government spending is bad. And in return, the only way to fix the economy is for businesses, you and I, or the states and municipalities to go into private debt. There was an article just today talking about how the businesses are all going deep into debt. Businesses are taking on huge debt. It's the next bubble waiting to happen. There doesn't need to be these bubbles, folks. But neoliberalism creates it, because once it explodes, then the neoliberals watch as everyone loses everything, and then they swoop in and get a saving, like super savings on our labor, super savings on our lives. They come in there and they offer us pennies on the dollar for our existence. I have a son who is autistic. You all probably know people with children who are autistic. If you talk to your local state providers, early intervention, etc., and you ask them what is the single most pressing need they have, they will tell you it's funding. When you go and you look at teachers and you say, hey, why aren't you doing this? And they say it's funding. When you ask why we can't pay teachers a real wage since they have our children in their hands, it's funding. Two choices there, folks. You and I go into private debt like these cities and states keep doing, and we keep doing, or the federal government spends into existence the money needed to keep the economy going and growing and having prosperity for us all. Why have we chosen to allow people that are economically illiterate to control the narrative? There's only two choices. They either don't know any better, or they really, really fucking do. And they don't mind seeing us die and suffer. I've reached a point that I don't have any more patience. I have no more patience. In fact, let me tell you, not only do I have no more patience, but this is right here is something that we all need to grasp hold of right here. This right here is something that we need to grasp hold of. You want to talk about gun violence. You want to talk about xenophobia. You want to talk about people hating each other in the trenches of the streets. When you take away our ability to survive, when you make the employer have all the cards and you're just so grateful to have a job, because if you step out of line, if you do anything that slightly bothers them, you could lose your entire livelihood and your entire family goes down the toilet. The most dangerous creation of any society is the man who has nothing to lose. And I want you to understand beyond the shadow of a doubt that if we don't get our act together as revolutionaries, and if we don't get our act together as a movement, and if we don't get our act together as a nation, we're going to see a lot of bloodshed, and we're going to see a lot of pain and suffering. And my son, who has autism, he's not even going to be worrying about whether he can get help, because society will be so dog eat dog that back in the old days, they would call them feeble-minded and kill them or institutionalize them. I blame everybody that knows and has heard this message in the past and has chosen to say it's a psyop. I blame them for it. I blame them for it. I blame the establishment for allowing us to go back and forth when they could easily clear these things up. I blame the cowardly politicians that are afraid to tell the truth because an unbelieving public won't elect them or re-elect them. But since I usually focus on my side of the street, I blame people that have heard and have chosen to reject the message, that say that we've got to reduce the debt, reduce the deficit, and all that other stuff. Because that right there, by the government, which creates its own money out of thin air, when you reduce the deficit, that means you reduce our income, you and my. Our ability to survive is immediately tarnished. And we don't have health care in this country. If you don't have money, you don't get surgery. If you don't have money, you don't get medicine. If you don't have money, you don't get treatment. And if you're not willing to take on a metric ton of private debt, chances are, unless you were a shining star of perfection, you're going to have a huge student loan just so that you can survive in the workforce and provide for yourself and your family. And there's still no guarantees. Because there are PhDs as baristas right now, because as much as we may have quote unquote full employment, we've got an incredible amount of underemployment. We've got people that are highly skilled, that are doing low skilled jobs and are miserable and feel destitute and desire death versus their day-to-day existence. Neoliberalism creates insanity. Neoliberalism creates anger and rage because it is based in a false belief of scarcity for everything. But what the scarcity is just for you and I. It pushes us to go into private debt. And Wall Street, that you claim to want to shut down, benefits. The wealthy fat cats are sitting there drinking their Grand Marnier, smoking their Cohibas, while you're sitting there busting your ass. Too tired to do your kids' homework with them because you don't have the time to breathe. Oh, yeah. I spoke to the Green Party directly in New Jersey. I did a presentation. Their leadership sat in the hallway, or they stood up when they saw I was speaking and left the room. I have had other people like Rohan Gray went out to the Democracy Convention out there in Minnesota to talk about MMT with an AMI team and a whole public, all the rest of them sitting there, and Rohan held court. Green Party had asked Warren Mosler. Warren Mosler went on with a bunch of people that were saying gibberish, and Warren crushed them. And yet still, we hear stupid, worthless nonsense about it's a psyop. It's a government psyop. Japan has 250% debt to GDP and cannot crack 2% inflation. Australia has public health service. Nobody suffers like that. They're complaining because they're starting to feel neoliberalism hit down under. But they are living in a paradise compared to what the United States dog-eat-dog world has become. The UK is going through a lot of this conservative backlash with the Tories. But let me tell you, they still have it better than us. Everyone has it better than us. All in the name of freedom, my freedoms, my gun and my flag. These colors don't run. Or it's a psyop. Just as dumb, both of them. And our kids suffer. Tell me when you're ready to get serious about this so that we can fix it. I don't think we can vote our way out of this, but if you're going to vote, make sure you vote for someone that gets it. I'm going to vote, but it's just because I feel like I don't want to leave any stone unturned. But the reality is, I'm looking at building power outside the duopoly. So we're not worried about what party you are. Because every time, well, hey, you got a Dem enter. Hey, you got a Green enter. I can't hear what you're saying because it's green or blue. I'm not playing that game, homie. I'm here about the people, the 99%. And that includes the Greens that sat there and destroyed their economic platform. That includes the Democrats who continually seek the pay-fors and who want to we're going to balance the budget. You know, Bubba here, I get a nice cigar and blue dress, and I'm going to go ahead and balance the budget and get you a surplus, baby. W done ran the surplus out and all the other crap. They keep pulling this. They keep going for this. And at some point in time, we're going to realize you cannot have a New Deal like FDR did, or his second Bill of Rights, or a great society, pretending that a nation that creates its own currency can go bankrupt. You would have to be utterly devoid of any sparks firing, no synapses firing up here, nothing, just like flatline. A country that creates its own currency, aka a sovereign currency issuing nation, can do tremendous things. It can do tremendous evil too, like have a huge war machine that goes all around the world, bombing the hell out of people. That's one thing we can do with our public money, isn't it? But when you talk about saving people's lives, fixing and ending poverty, fixing our education system, fixing our environment, some dumbass will sit there and say, but what about inflation, baby? What about inflation? You mean you're going to just print more money? What are you going to print more money for, man? You're going to devalue my dollar. Idiot. You just want to have Napoleon Dynamite go, idiot. This is ground zero, my friends. This is the fight. Because we need more than just this little pocket of Greens to get it. And we need a hell of a lot more than just this little pocket of progressive Democrats to get it. We need to lift the freaking curtains up and show everyone how this works. So we can put these lies and the debt ceilings and all the other nonsense about debt being passed on to our kids. The only debt we're passing on to our children is the private debt we incur, or worse, the debt to the environment that we pass on to them as they have to inhabit the earth we've left them. That's the real debt. But I don't hear these people talking about that. I hear them putting Band-Aids on heart attacks and ignoring anything that dissuades them from the gibberish that they're taught at their little fireside chats. If you want a Green New Deal, and I know you do, you sure as hell better get with the program and learn how a sovereign currency issuing nation operates. It is that important. I don't know how to make it any more important to you other than just tell you point blank. Without this, there is no New Deal. There is no health care. There is no free college. There is no ending student debt. There's none of it. None of it. And we will continue to suffer until that frickin' light bulb goes off and you realize, oh, snap. I guess I've got blood on my hands because I was pushing to reduce the deficit and reduce the debt. And those poor people that were down there begging for crumbs died because of my worthlessness. It's not good enough to talk about the other guy. It's time to clean house in-house. Our team, team us, team we. You remember that? Not me, us. Well, it's time for us to get our economic act together. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives, hoping you take the moment to teach one, each one teach one, and learn MMT. Have a good night, everyone.